cover or this thing. On that point, I would request Dr. Gupta to come over and make up. If you are asking any questions, please.
Yeah. So regarding ecosystem services, the flow of ecosystem services, this has been kind of debated last 3 decades. The first work, international work, which was done on ecosystem services, the quantification of ecosystem services, economic valuation, was by a group led by a scientist named as Costanza. So Costanza had there is a paper in 1997 which was published in the magazine Nature. And in 1997, this paper had valued the value of all the global ecosystem services as 33 trillion. Now this is the valuation at that time, 97. To put it into perspective, the current size of the US economy is around that, $35 trillion. So in 97, the global economic value of the ecosystem services was this much. But what does it mean? I mean, it's kind of notional value, because you say 33 trillion or 40 trillion or whatever. So I agree with Dr. Bharucha that we are doing the valuation, but for what purpose? Because going to pay, what is the payment mechanism?
तो लोगों को आज ये लगता है कि एक कोई बिल्डिंग खड़ी हो गई या कहीं मेट्रो आ गया पुणे में या भोपाल में, जहाँ वी आर नॉट रियली रिक्वायरिंग मेट्रो सर्विसेज, लोगों को लग रहा है कि दिस इज डेवलपमेंट is being wiped out. So people not raising voices because they don't understand the economic value. I am trying to again underline the fact that they have been giving us the eco services silently, and as Dr. Beno said, nature doesn't require us, we require nature, but we are not able to understand. So therefore I was trying to say कि मैं भोपाल से आता हूँ और भोपाल एक ऐसा शहर है जहाँ पर म्यूनिसिपल या जहाँ मैं रहता हूँ शहर के बीचों बीच, उससे सिर्फ 2 किलोमीटर दूसरे there are tigers in the heart of the city of Bhopal capital, that where I live. And the National Tiger Conservation Authority last year came with full authority and had held a meeting in Bhopal to understand the behavior of the urban tigers in Bhopal, which are more than 25 tigers moving in and about Bhopal municipal limits. But people who are mighty and rich, they are trying to shoo away them. Lots of buildings are being constructed in their corridors, and there are tiger lovers and nature lovers like us. We are fighting with government that their tiger, because we are entering their homes, they are not entering our homes.
Our brothers and sisters, and we should also respect them because they are very similar to us.
Very important statement.
We are all part of nature, and they are very similar to us. Just look at them, right? So it's not just that we need them for economic purposes, also economic, emotional, but it all fits together, it all belongs to each other. So what I said that when I gave my presentation, we really have to relearn again how to respect nature, including ourselves, much more.
That is very important point. We have to relearn, which means that we have forgotten what the nature has given to us or is giving to us. So over to Dr. Diago.
First of all, it's a great honor to be in such a esteemed company, and with some seniors who have been working in this sector for many, many years. I would like to bring a perspective which is more complex, because Biosphere Reserve as an entity, it's a beautiful concept. It's integrated space with need to have integrated solutions, but it's very complex. As Dr. Bharucha said, it has different zones. There is a core zone, then there is a buffer zone and transitional zone. Each zone has its own complications, and it offers us different ways of interacting and engaging with solutions for that zone. A very important aspect of biosphere reserves, if you see whether it's India or all across, is not only diversity, which is biodiversity, but it is cultural diversity. Biosphere reserve, especially in a country like India, which we say, हर 2 किलोमीटर में पानी बदलता है, भाषा बदलती है, but every few kilometers the language changes, the water changes, the environment changes. Imagine a biosphere reserve which is of maybe hundreds of square kilometers, how much diversity it would have. So a single solution or a single principle or a single framework will not work, and that is why engagement with those different components is very important. How do you bring about changes in a system in a manner that it addresses all these different problems and proportionately addresses all these different problems? Because every problem will have different impact on the environment, on the socio-ecological system. So in some way, our biosphere reserve is also like a biocultural reserve. It's not just for biodiversity, which has integrated or inherent value. It is also the cultural systems that we have who are living in this system, and because of those cultural systems also, the biodiversity is also surviving. We have in India, there are so many communities all across, whichever, if you see this, I'll go haphazard with my presentation because it is just with the thought that I have that I made this. So in all across these areas, if you see the biosphere reserves, we have ethnic communities, tribal communities who are living there, who have been living there for many years, and their systems, their worldview have evolved around that. The way we know a city of traffic and who lives where, which market is where, the same way these communities know their area. That is why communicating, integrating them in the planning is very important. The solutions have to be localized, they have to be local solutions, and they have to come from the people themselves. That is where I think the concept of biosphere reserves also holds true, because it is not only for conservation, it is also for economic development. And economic development is again for the people who are dependent on the resources which these biosphere reserves have to offer. And as Dr. Gulcha mentioned, the aspect of public awareness and education. I see so many youngsters sitting here. In few years, you will be maybe in this guys talking about biosphere reserves, and many of you will have grandchildren who will live in the year 2300, if I'm not wrong. In 70 years, we will have 2300. We are living in 2024, so we'll have. So imagine what kind of generation we are really raising, and where will these sort of concepts of not only biosphere reserves but other forest area will take us. So it is important to integrate all of it. Think about it, how we can create more knowledge and awareness about biosphere reserves and also about the ecological diversity that we have in the. As again Dr. Gulcha had mentioned that we do travel to these areas, but we don't know whether these are biosphere reserves or not. So what we maybe also need is some sort of an integrated policy and a bit more strengthening of the existing mechanisms which are already there. What biosphere reserves do have is a lot of challenges. So we have challenges which range from threats to not only biodiversity, but also a lot of these areas are situated across our boundaries. So we have issues which are related to national security. So how do you then engage with neighboring countries, also neighboring states, to formalize maybe a broader sort of framework which helps not only the people who are living across the borders, but also biodiversity which is traveling across, the animals who are traveling across. Again, as I said, very important is the engagement with the local communities, and a very important aspect, these are also lived landscapes. Lived landscapes means people are living here. There are different things which are happening, dams being built, roads being constructed, railways, infrastructure, impetus being how do we then do policy prioritization for which components are important for which landscape, which aspects, also which zones need which policy need to be more prioritized, and how to also integrate it with other policies. In India, we have so many policies and very good policies and laws which are related to environment, which are related to communities, which are related to infrastructure. How do you integrate that to come up with a model which is truly a model for sustainable development of a biosphere reserve. A very important aspect is also managing conflicts, because in these areas where people live in very close vicinity with wild animals, and also have somewhere a sort of a relationship with the government, where their resource access may get restricted or they may be stopped for doing something. How do we then help manage these areas so that we manage these conflicts, so that the communities are not at risk of having their livelihoods taken away because of certain restrictions we are putting on certain aspects. That's why a model of biosphere reserve works in a better way, because it also talks about sustainable development, but we also need to strengthen it much further. Lack of public awareness definitely is there, but I think forums like these present us an opportunity to talk about a concept like biosphere reserve, so that we are much more knowledgeable and we take care of it in a much better way, and we also do management planning in a much better way when we are aware of a concept like that. So what could be, I would say, some of the strategies that we can think of as a biosphere stakeholders who work in an area? There are different stakeholders from local communities. Within local communities, if I have to really break it down, there are communities who will be very strong, who are politically strong, who are financially strong. There are also communities who are not very strong, heavily resource dependent. There are tribal communities, there are scheduled caste, and also very importantly, there are women and youth who are sort of considered, say, a marginalized group of the society. How do you integrate all of that in a management planning or in planning for a landscape or planning for a biosphere reserve? We need to integrate all these different components when we are thinking about a landscape, when we're thinking about a biosphere reserve. How do you integrate all these stakeholders and take their views forward to make a more comprehensive and inclusive and participatory management plan and planning? Youngsters who are sitting here will also look forward to seeing some sort of a technology interventions, because we are now living in a world where AI is coming in a big way. What is the future? Where can we use new technologies of spatial mapping, of detailed spatial mapping, preparing comprehensive or getting comprehensive information for a lot of these areas where there is massive data gaps vis-a-vis the biological diversity that actually these spaces have to offer. There's so many new species which are still being discovered from the remotest corners of our country. So how do you bring this new technology, new information, make new databases, so that at least if we have to do planning, for planning very important aspect is information. Once you have information, you will do better planning. So how do you get that information out? By using the most latest and modern technology, yet not forgetting the importance of traditional knowledge of local communities. That is absolutely integral. We are in the landscape where people have lived. Their knowledge is much more important and much more integral and much more connected to what or where they are living. It is socially relevant, it is culturally relevant, it is also technologically relevant where the communities are living, and we need to take their knowledge inputs while making any decisions about the policies of a place, wherever we are doing any sort of a policy decision making. Livelihood definitely is important, because we need to provide livelihoods. A biosphere reserve will have challenges. There are complicated issues. The young generation's aspirations are very from the older generations. They may not be interested in collecting firewood from a jungle, or they may not be interested in doing, taking a hike into the forest to collect some small species which is away, which is maybe kilometers away. I know in certain areas in Kanchenjunga where cordyceps collection is very popular, but cordyceps are very, very expensive. So they do actually spend a lot of time in the high altitude areas and do stay over in the tents overnight to collect those, cordyceps. They are root or ground dwelling sort of species, caterpillar fungus, and they are very expensive. So, but this is this generation. Maybe the next generation may not be interested in doing this. And with regards to that, we also need to think about how do we sustainably then manage these resources. Because with the collection and this price that some of these species have, there is also a risk of overharvesting. So this is complicated. The issue of biodiversity and biosphere reserve is very complicated. You have multiple things now all around us, and that's why it's good to not go with a rosy picture that biosphere reserve, let us conserve it, but also look at the minuteness and the integrity and the little things that these reserves contain and unpack them, and then look at it where what interventions can happen. That unpacking of a rosy picture is very important if we need to have a realistic ground level impact, and which is also beneficial not only for the communities but also for for general biodiversity. And as we know that these biosphere reserves are sort of like a testing laboratories. So how do you make that connection where these local solutions provide some sort of a global level larger outcomes? So these are some of the points that I wanted to sort of bring forward vis-a-vis how we can conserve biosphere reserve, unpack some of these, and think of a way in which we can strengthen existing policies, maybe bring about some new changes, and how do we look at different stakeholders, different communities who are working there, being there, and find out more solution which is more integrated, comprehensive, yet very nuanced, very localized and contextual.
Thank you, Dr. Pia, for such a comprehensive presentation. Such a comprehensive in the sense that it is leaving no questions for me to be asked to you. Yet I will ask you, because you have already spoken about strategies, you have already spoken about the challenges. So would you like to suggest one or two aspects of governance as far as protecting and securing these BRs? Because the BRs, we may not be painting a rosy picture, but fact remains that there are certain challenges at the ground level. The challenge of Pachmadi biosphere could be different from other biospheres, and the issues involved of the local tribes or people who are dependent on this, the forest produce, etc., or the benefits. So, what is the tweak or what is the change in governance approach as far as BRs are concerned? Because we know about tiger reserves. Tiger reserves are too famous to be dealt with here. People know what NTCA is doing. NTCA was created, and National Tiger Task Force under Sunita Nayak was created to protect tiger reserve, etc. But as far as BRs are concerned, what is the governance approach you would suggest? That you have already enlisted number of things, but one thing that you would like to share with us here, so that the importance and the services that the BRs are rendering, that will improve. So, governance approach, any aspect that you are thinking that is very important as far as conservation is concerned. Thank you.
I think just the nature of the reserve or biosphere reserve is such that unlike tiger reserves or any other forest areas, biosphere reserve is much broader. It may include maybe a few urban settlements also, towns also, a lot of villages. I think having a multi-stakeholder platform and an approach for each biosphere reserve could be very important, where you identify key, integral and important stakeholders, make a platform, make a common, sort of a avenue for them to come together every few years, discuss what are the challenges, have a range of experts who also come and make suggestions. So having this sort of a platform where diverse groups can come together, interdisciplinary in some way, and also stakeholder-wise, not just discipline-wise, but stakeholder-wise, where we are including the most marginalized to also the most powerful, because everybody has a very important role to play in governing or managing the biosphere reserve and deciding its future.
Yes, Dr. Barucha.
I think we have to use our Panchayati Raj system for this, because there are a large number of villages in the two outer zones, right? And the Biodiversity Act actually facilitates this through looking at BMCs, Biodiversity Management Committees at the village level. And strengthening that, I tried to do this in Maharashtra with reasonable success. So not for biosphere reserves, but for other protected areas. And there where you can strengthen the BMC, the Biodiversity Management Committee of the village, with the capacity building and with a certain amount of finance and alternate income generation facilities, you see change in about 5 or 10 years. So it's not a very long-term thing also. It's not that you're looking at 50 years. You're looking at a period of 5, 10 years, 15 years, and saying, where do I go from that with local people? The other part of it is both out-migration and in-migration, having different groups of people moving in and out for different purposes, like support for tourism coming in, but actually people who actually live there and farm traditionally, they're moving out. So these are complex dynamic things which we can look and explore. But I think the way to do that is to strengthen biodiversity management committees, make those biodiversity management committees look at access and benefit sharing of resources, and coming up with a solution there. We don't have enough good examples of access and benefit sharing, and perhaps biosphere reserves are the key place where we could perhaps do this.
Thank you. But that also gives me some understanding of the biodiversity area. Dr. Madhav Gadgil from Pune has recently written about his autobiography, in which he has extensively written about Biodiversity Act, how it was created, and the need for management committees, etc. But sir, let me tell you this audience also, that the biodiversity registers are not being maintained by most of the local bodies. And I spoke to about 10 municipal commissioners in Madhya Pradesh, if they are doing something about that. All 10 municipal commissioners of big cities in Indore, Bhopal, Ujjain, Gwalior, Sagar, said we are not aware about the Biodiversity Act. So that led me to organize the first Urban Biodiversity Conservation Conference at Indore in 2022. We issued a declaration for urban biodiversity conservation. But fact remains that the Act came into force in 2002. The National Biodiversity Authority at Chennai was formed in 2005. State boards were also formed eventually. But biodiversity conservation is somehow not the priority area of governments. That is the fact which I know for personally. So another question I wanted to ask Dr. Gupta, you come from the internationally acclaimed body like WWF. So I would like to know from you what WWF is doing in the areas of DRs. Some activities we are undertaking.
So if I look at the map, we have presence in almost half of these areas, from Assam to Nilgiris to Kanchenjunga, and we are doing a lot of work which is also, we have what we call landscape level approach, which is exactly what say a Biosphere Reserve would also look like, where we not only work on wildlife and wild species, we also work with communities. And as Dr. Bhusha earlier mentioned, corridors. So we have a lot of work in the central India and in Assam, where we're working also in maintaining corridor connectivity. So we try to not just focus on one thing, but have a very wide array of things that we do, ranging from environmental education to legal policy, frameworks, or suggesting policies to the government, or working on even transportation of animals, assisting the forest department in that, community engagement, and also providing tenurial security to some of the communities in our country, preparing conservation management plans with them, which is under the Forest Rights Act. So we make this management conservation community resource forest management plans with them, where they can then regulate, or how do they then access their resources better, having some sustainable harvesting protocols in it. So it also empowers them in managing their resources and also monitoring the resources, which is also very important, that the communities are not only they are not only the users, they are also the guardians of those resources, and we need to also integrate with the traditional knowledge a little bit of scientific inputs, where they can themselves monitor their resources, do a little bit of ecological monitoring every few years, assess what they are seeing, and we can sort of help them in strengthening those institutions.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Benu, you wanted to say something? Maybe that's the mic, but I would like to hear.
Sorry?
You are trying to...
No, not now.
You're most welcome.
I have a few points to mention later.
Later, okay. So over to Dr. Aditya Joshi, the last presenter and a very eminent forester. He has worked in the field and in Manipur and different places in the country. So he has the field knowledge and also knowledge about governance and the issues that come in for the biosphere reserve. Dr. Aditya Joshi. Please give a big hand to...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So since I am the last speaker, I think most of the points that I had in my presentation are already been covered. And the audience also has, I guess, been educated to some extent about what a biosphere reserve is and why do we need biosphere reserves. So can any one of you tell me, why do we need biosphere reserves? Or, if you can tell me what is a biosphere reserve? Can anyone? Yes, please.
Human beings, the plants, the animals,
Absolutely correct. Absolutely, you are absolutely correct. That is why we need a biosphere.
for sustainable development and for the environment, for the green lungs, like we say that these are the green lungs of. So we need fresh air and all that.
Yes, yes, absolutely correct. And what is a biosphere reserve? Why biosphere reserve? This is the answer. What is a biosphere reserve?
Biosphere reserve is a, you can say, a piece of area which is earmarked for biodiversity, for plants, animals, for where human intervention is minimal. Because they also need their habitat, plants and animals, tigers, and they need animals. They need their habitat, they need their space. So that is a piece of area where human beings, it's secluded from human beings, from human activities, so that it is preserved and they can nature can flourish by itself.
Okay, okay. So now let me come to the topic. Like the gentleman mentioned, the biosphere reserves. When we talk of biosphere reserve, and the difference between biosphere reserve and other protected area network is the presence of human beings. So in a biosphere reserve, the human community is an integral part of the landscape. Whereas in other protected area networks, if you talk of a national park, a wildlife sanctuary, a tiger reserve, human beings are excluded from the landscape. So it is meant for only the wildlife. Suppose tiger reserve is meant for tigers, and human activities have to be minimal there. But in a biosphere reserve, both humans and wildlife have to be there. Now, why we need biosphere reserves? Because, as you all know, our planet is facing 3 environmental crises. What are they? One is the biodiversity loss in wildlife, loss of natural resources, and if the natural resources are reduced, what will happen? The flow of ecosystem services, which we were just mentioning, will decline, which will impact our life as we know it. The second environmental crisis that we are facing is pollution. Pollution, plastic pollution, other kinds of pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, whatever, all kinds of pollution. And the third crisis that we are facing is climate change. Now, to mitigate the effects of all these 3 environmental crises, we need the biosphere reserves. So this is, I think, why we need biosphere reserves. What are they? Dr. Bharocha has already mentioned that we have these biogeographic zones. So we have characteristic ecosystems in biogeographic zones. And they can be terrestrial, they could be coastal, they could be marine. And each of these biogeographic zones, wherever there is unique and rich biodiversity, so that area is fit to be a biosphere reserve. So this is perhaps how we kind of define what would be a biosphere reserve. As I mentioned, human communities are an integral part of it. One of the central tenets, again, conservation of natural resources and biodiversity, along with sustainable use for human benefit. It has already been mentioned here, the concept was launched in 1971 by UNESCO under the Man and Biosphere program. In 2015, Lima Action Plan, in which they say, in Lima Action Plan, sets out some action plans for all the biosphere reserves, and they say that biosphere reserves have to be examples, models of sustainable development, and which can then be replicated elsewhere. So this is, as per Lima Action Plan 2015 to 2025, it's still running, this is the last year. Again, they are very critical to meet the global biodiversity framework targets. Global biodiversity framework target, one of the main targets is 30 by 30. That means 30% of our Earth's surface, the natural ecosystems have to be preserved, have to be protected, have to be conserved by 2030. That is the target given in the COP15. So, coming to the next slide here. Now, when we come to India, we have already seen there are 18 biosphere reserves. This is a map. This has already been shown. 12 have been recognized by UNESCO. 6 have not been. Mr. Bohr has mentioned that 3 are already in the pipeline and they are under consideration. I am sure what Ministry of Environment and Forests has informed us that the other 3 are also to be forwarded to UNESCO for approval. So the 12 which have already been recognized by UNESCO have been shown by Mr. Bharucha. The 6 which have not been, I don't have photographs, but I'll just mention them. 3 are in the northeast. One is Manas Biosphere Reserve, one is Dibru Saikhowa Biosphere Reserve in Assam, one is Dibang Biosphere Reserve in Arunachal Pradesh. Then you have the Gulf of Kutch Biosphere Reserve, the Cold Desert in Himachal Pradesh, and then you have the 6th one is Sheshachal, or Slender Forest, the Eastern Ghats in Andhra Pradesh. Now, how do these biosphere reserves function? Now, they are basically nominated by the central government, but the management, the control, the funding, and the regulation is by the state governments. And UNESCO has a kind of advisory role. UNESCO recognizes them and then supports technically with the ministry, because there is a committee, like it was mentioned, the Man and Biosphere Committee in the Ministry of Environment and Forests, which regularly meets to monitor the activities. Now, biosphere reserves, if we look at the objectives, there are 3 basic objectives. One is conservation, goes without saying, because the very purpose is protecting of biodiversity. When we talk of biodiversity, we are talking of 3 kinds of biodiversity, at the ecosystem level, at the species level, and at the genetic level. Then development of the communities, because human beings are an integral part of the biosphere reserve. So their sustainable development, their livelihood, their alternate, because hitherto, before they were biosphere reserve, or before they were protected area network, they might be dependent on that area for their livelihood, for their life. But since now part of it is closed, so again you have to provide for some alternate livelihoods. This is where development comes. And third is the logistic support, where you have things like research, monitoring, education and information exchange, which are also very important. We touched upon how we have to create awareness, how we have to involve the communities, and this can only be done through education, through information exchange. Research and monitoring is also very important, because then only you will know how the biosphere is being impacted upon with the human activities. Structure, there is zonation, already it has been shown here, there is a core zone. Now, core zone is basically the protected area. So, a biosphere reserve, especially in India, any biosphere reserve can have 1 or more of these protected areas, national parks or wildlife sanctuaries, and these are the core areas. So, here human activity, human access is restricted, very less human activity. In fact, only monitoring is allowed. In the buffer zone, there are activities like research, education, tourism, ecotourism, or whenever you go to a tiger reserve or wherever you are entering the buffer zone only. And then it was pointed out, it was highlighted that Biosphere Reserve have a transition zone. So this transition zone is the actual zone where, how they differ from a protected area network, and where the needs of the humans or the which are dependent on that biosphere reserve have to be met. So these are the donations. This is just a diagram, figurative diagram of the three zones. Now, ideally, they should be concentric, like it is shown here, three circles, one inside the other. But in the field, it is not like this. In many areas, as I said, there are a number of core areas, so there are core areas, they are scattered, and in between you can have buffer area, or you can have transition zone, or in some areas you can have core in one side, and this is only a diagram. This thing, but it doesn't happen in the field like this. And coming to what is the importance of biosphere reserve, I think we have all now at this stage, the end of this panel discussion, we have already gone through this. Biodiversity conservation, sustainable development of the communities, research and monitoring are touched upon, education and awareness. I just highlight this cultural preservation because human life, we are culturally attached to our natural resources, to the forest, to the mountains, to the rivers. We are having the Mahakumbh, in the river, it is in the ethos, and especially for India. And since we have this kind of we used to have a sustainable lifestyle very close to nature and all that. So in the Indian context, this cultural aspect is very important, very strong, and we'll come to this later. So then, what are the challenges? Now, see, biosphere reserves, because they are in different geographic zones, they will have, some of the challenges will be specific to that area. Suppose we have a coastal biosphere reserve or a marine biosphere reserve, it will have a specific challenge. And some challenges will be kind of generic, which will be common across across all the biosphere reserves. So here we have just listed some of the common challenges, the generic challenges. Pollution, I mentioned pollution and environmental degradation through industrial waste, plastics, chemicals, climate change impact. We are having these erratic weather patterns, high temperatures, high rainfall, human encroachment. Many of the transition areas, buffer areas, we have human encroachment. Illegal activities happen, illegal felling, illegal mining, quarrying of stone, sand, all this is happening. Threat to endangered species. In many areas we have the human-wildlife conflict. We have poaching, hunting, fishing, illegal fishing. These things are happening. The invasive species which are encroaching into the habitat, destroying the habitat, altering the habitat. Then community and livelihoods conflict. Even communities can have conflict within a transition zone. Weak governance and policy intervention, because many times our monitoring is not very strict, our management plans are not being effectively implemented. So this is there. The development versus conservation, this is always a challenge for any forester or any officer or any personnel who is working in the field, because you have the need for roads, you have need for infrastructure, roads, railway lines, transmission lines, gas pipelines. They all have to go through the maybe buffer zone or transition zone, or even sometimes core zone also. And then insufficient funding and resource allocation. Here again, many times the management plans are there, the activities are all lined up, but because of funding they cannot be taken up. So these are some of the challenges which the management is facing. Now coming to a few specific biosphere reserves, I have taken this Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Now this is the program of Nanda Devi, and the other one is the East Nanda Devi. Nanda Devi is a pristine mountain ecosystem. It is again very rare flora and fauna. There is the Himalayan brown bear, there is the vegetation, you were mentioning cordyceps enhances, that is also there, and Sosaria lapa, Brahmakamal, that is part of this thing. Now, again, here what happened was, in Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve there are two national parks, the Nanda Devi National Park and the Valley of Flowers National Park. The area of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve is around 6,000 some odd square kilometers. And if you see the area of Nanda Devi National Park and Valley of Flowers National Park, it's around 600 to 700 square kilometers, say 10 to 12%. So 12% is the core area, rest is buffer and transition. Now, before the national park was declared and the Biosphere Reserve was formed, the people had a lot of place. I mean, it was open access to everyone, and they used to go there to collect the medicinal plants, to collect cordyceps, to collect other medicinal plants and all. So initially, when these controls were established and it was formed into a national park, the communities, there was a lot of resentment in the communities, and they had some loss of income and all these things are there. But now the management, it is being managed by the forest department there. So they have now started, encouraging the people for ecotourism activities in the transition route and other, alternate activities, especially in agriculture, subsistence agriculture, horticulture, whatever. So there's a sea change in this Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Then the other one I'm taking is this Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve. Here, Sikkim government has played a very proactive role. They have kind of formed this committee, Kanchenjunga Conservation Committee, and it's basically based on ecotourism. They regulated the ecotourism, controlled entry, code of conduct for tourists entering, trekking to the area. By the way, these are very difficult areas because they are high, altitude areas. It's not possible for everyone to go there. So, but anyway, everyone to go, waste disposal and all these kind of things are there. So this is being controlled. So this is one success story in the Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve, and we are told that from Nepal side also they are kind of now. Then Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Now here, if you see Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, there is one striking thing is there is no transition zone in Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. There is only the core zone and there is a buffer zone. So there is no transition zone, but is happening that is leading to habitat fragmentation, human-wildlife conflict. By the way, Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary is part of Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. And Wayanad is mostly in the news these days because the elephants are going into Wayanad and creating a lot of disturbance and all. And so this human-wildlife conflict is happening in Nilgiri. Unregulated development, even Mr. Bharucha touched upon this, that a lot of unregulated development is taking place. Invasive species are proliferating, leading to habitat degradation. So now here, if we take one part of, in fact, for Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, one of the biggest challenges is that there is no central authority to manage the Biosphere Reserve. This Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve is in 3 states: Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. Bandipur, Nagarjuna, and Mudumalai, Tamil Nadu, and Silent Valley, and Wayanad. Essentially, these are all part of this Biosphere Reserve. So all 3 state governments are working on their own. But for Tamil Nadu, the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, they have this Tiger Conservation Foundation, where again they are taking up ecotourism activities with the community. So then Gulf of Mannar was mentioned by Mr. Board that the Michel Percept Award was given to Mr. Jagdish Babu. So this is the same case study. In Gulf of Mannar, there was pollution because it's a marine biosphere reserve. Industrial activities were causing pollution. There was over-harvesting of marine resources, illegal fishing, the corals, the holothurians, which are seahorses, sea cucumbers, a lot of fishing in them. By the way, it is banned by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, but then it's still being illegally caught. Then coral reef and marine biodiversity decline. Now, this Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve Trust, that was established in 2002 with the assistance of GEF, the Global Environment Facility. And this work in which the Michel Percept Award was given to Mr. James Cotton is this, which I have just mentioned here: microcredit provision and diverse livelihood opportunities. The microcredit was provided to the people there for livelihood options, palm leaf products, palm jaggery, formation of community-based organizations and women's self-help group, 252 EDCs were made and 1,994 cessor groups were formed, 19,940 were beneficiaries. Then community-based ecotourism projects, about 250 direct jobs were there, and then community-operated plastic management programs. That is also one part of this activity of the Gulf of Mannar through this trust. Now I come to the last slide. Now, what is the way forward? How do we see, because time is very short, I am not going into the major challenges what are there in the field when we manage a biosphere reserve. There are a lot of challenges. But here I am just pointing out and kind of highlighting the most effective strategies that can be put in place for more effective management of biosphere reserve. What are they? One is the strong stakeholder participation. Local communities have to be, in fact, the very concept of biosphere reserve is under man and biosphere. So the human beings are kind of, as I have already mentioned, into part, and it is a participatory approach. Biosphere reserve is a participatory approach. So local communities have to be included in decision making, in benefit sharing. Then the management strategies have to be adaptive. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a thing like Subodh was mentioning. It's a process. It's not that it's over. It is always, you keep on changing. Then effective governance structure. There has to be some structure. Like as mentioned in Nilgiri, there is no central, no authority. Unlike like in Gulf of Mannar, there is a trust which is coordinating all the activities. So the things are happening through that nodal agency. Education and learning, my previous speakers have already touched upon it, the importance of education, awareness campaigns, engaging the people, and of course, not to say economic incentives for sustainable practices, these are very there. And only one point is missing here, that is adequate funding. So adequate funding is also required if we have to really conserve our biosphere reserves and see that they are managed in a very. So I'll end here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
All good things have come to an end at some point of time. So all the excellent presentations have ended. Now give a big hand to all my eminent panelists and bringing out important points. So Dr. Joshi, I would like to ask you only one question. I asked the other panelists two questions, so please allow me to ask you only one question because time is running out. So you spoke about the nodal the supervision and monitoring of biosphere reserves. So what I wanted to ask UNESCO chief is here. I was associated with the declaration of some Ramsar sites, wetland conservation, and so there are biosphere reserves also which are also declared by with the support of UNESCO, or they are basically UNESCO tag. So in the Ramsar site, the experience has been that once the Ramsar tag is attached to a wetland, some awareness is generated, but it doesn't really result in conservation of the wetlands across the country. So what is the difference between the biosphere reserves having been protected through the process of UNESCO's Man and Biodiversity project, and without that, because Dr. Barucha also said there are a number of areas which are overlapping each other. So what is one thing that you would like to tell us about the aspect of a particular area having been declared as biosphere reserve with UNESCO's support?
Yes. So first of all, let me mention you mentioned the Ramsar sites. So actually Ramsar sites, the name is actually the wetlands of.
Yes.
So wetlands of international importance. And the first conference was held in Ramsar
in
Iran.
1972.
So that is 1972. So that is why it is known as the Ramsar Convention. Now Ramsar Convention is focusing only on the wetlands.
Correct.
As far as biosphere reserves are concerned, they are under the MAB program of UNESCO, but the UNESCO is only recognizing them and it is part of the global kind of this MAB program that they have, and it is UNESCO's attempt to nudge all the countries in the world, all the nations in the world to have these kind of biosphere reserves. But there is no funding as such. There is no kind of, suppose it has been recognized by UNESCO, so some funds will flow. It is not like that. So that is there. Now, how does the biosphere reserve come into shape? Now, it is up to the national
No, what I
government.
mean to say, we definitely appreciate UNESCO's efforts as far as India is concerned, about Ramsar, about biosphere reserves and all other things. But how does it really help in conservation with the tag attached here of UNESCO's biosphere reserve / Ramsar sites?
Well,
At the ground level.
Well, it does give some importance to, once it is recognized as a UNESCO under the Man and Biosphere Reserve, it has some kind of international significance. And even for wetlands, suppose if you talk of international wetlands for international importance, once an area has been identified as a Ramsar site, the status, the kind of conservation status goes up. And that is why we are kind of always mentioning that suppose in UP so many sites have been identified as Ramsar sites. So it's similar for this biosphere reserves also.
So, Mr. President, do we have some 10 minutes to further this thing, or no? We are still asking. I am still asking questions, but if we have time, then I'll ask questions. So there will be a number of questions. But I am asking last question to each one of the panelists, because this is strategies for sustainable development and conservation. I think you are also monetizing the suggestions coming out from the expert, because we will ultimately take it to the Ministry of Forest or Environment. So one question or maybe one strategy each that you would like to suggest, just one each one of you. So Dr. Barucha, one strategy that you would like to briefly tell us about conserving or increasing the number of biosphere reserves. So I'll ask one strategy each. Okay, it's working. It's working, Doctor. Because it cannot be empty discussion. We have
I think
to take
we
it
have
to
missed
some.
out on one very important point today.
Yeah.
And that is, within biosphere reserves, there are large areas which are seriously degraded now. And so we have to go into a process of eco-restoration, using good science, bringing back the natural structure, the natural species composition, and the natural functions that are there, the ecological functions which have to be brought in. So I think there's a very important role to identify these degraded areas in these three transition zones, in these three different zones, especially in the transition zone, and say, how do I restore these? What actions do I need there? And who will do this, and in what sort of time frame, and what sort of money is
So,
available?
given a chance to you, you would like to suggest this as a strategy towards restoring that landscape. Thank you.
So we've talked a lot about eco-development today. We haven't talked about eco-restoration.
Dr. Gupta, one strategy.
Although it is already part of the principle of Biosphere Reserve, which is inclusive and participatory planning, but if we can strengthen it further and truly make an inclusive plan with the communities, with the marginalized group, that would be really a step forward in addressing the issues which are of diverse stakeholders.
Thank you. Dr. Joshi, I would like to give you the last laugh.
Okay. So I would also say that the biggest challenge that we face is in the management. There is no nodal agency. So every biosphere reserve has to have a kind of nodal agency with a interdepartmental kind of coordination agency with a specific mandate for the biosphere.
Thank you.
So I think that should be.
Dr. Benu.
Well, I mentioned already that my personal wish would be that all member states of UNESCO, every single one of the 194 member states, would make more funding available for biosphere reserves, and recognizing that biosphere reserves are really a jewel in nature conservation and in nature conservation for human survivability, really. But what I would like to see, and I've seen that in particular, I participated in one country where I lived before, which is the Federal Republic of Ethiopia. There we have carried out together with the Michael Zuko Foundation. They were in the lead, but UNESCO supported that. Many of the Ethiopian agencies, they supported that. We carried out a comprehensive potentiality analysis of biosphere reserves, including cross-border biosphere reserves between Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, and all the neighboring countries. I think I mentioned all of them. So if we have that available as a document, as like in a book form, that can be an extremely valuable documentation for 25, 50 years ahead, because it is something really valuable. In Ethiopia that was done, and I would recommend that as a strategy for every country, including those who don't have biosphere reserves.
Very nice. Thank you, Doctor. So I'm opening the floor for questions. How many questions can we take? 4 questions. So President Garg, please. Yeah, you said you were to ask a question. Yeah, please do.
So my question is, you see, there are indigenous people living in these all biosphere reserves. So none of the pioneers, that's my understanding, spoke about the masterpiece or central to all these conservation efforts. And what is happening in the last 3 decades, we are pushing them out from these core areas or the buffer areas. Whereas if you see, inherently they are conserving the forest for decades, for centuries. So in the whole planning process, which I am noticing in Government of India and other places, that tribals are missing tribals. That's my question to now who's my consultant.
Dr. Barucha, who has written a wonderful book and he has included the problems of the villagers and tribals. So may I ask you to respond to this question, sir? Can we have...
I'm afraid that's a long session in itself, but I think it's very important to understand that these cultures have their own specific traditional knowledge systems. And I think that is what we rather need to also look at. So whereas we need to homogenize and get this across the different states, the different biogeographic regions, I think it's also important to find out what local people really care about. And I think if we get what they care about and we push that button, we get a little more buy-in in what we do. And I think that's something that we fail to do. We sit here in a recognition hall and expound on this. But when you go out there, you realize that that is where the gap lies.
Correct. Thank you. Can you please identify yourself, sir?
My name is Mohanji Saxena, and that way I have reserved 4 questions to be asked during the dinner time. But one question which I would like to ask Dr. Barucha, and probably you can basically throw the light on this. Sir, the declining biosphere of Sundarban resulting into so many conflicts manifested in the habitat loss for the tiger. What do you think can be done to reverse that trend?
I think it's like any deltaic mangrove system, which is in itself a very dynamic system, both in terms of the day, in terms of 2-week cycles, And in terms of the long-term effects on that, of a various amount of siltation that's brought up. So there's a very, very complex thing. I think what many of these mangrove systems require is a very detailed assessment of the minor habitats within them. So you take an area like that and you go on planting mangroves. It's like planting trees in a grassland, right? So you need to understand how much of it do I need as open silt, as open mud banks, as open shale, and so on. So you look at it at a much more micro level than we have been doing so far. And I think that's part of it. The other part, of course, is human disturbance, and the amount of human disturbance that is increasingly happening now. I haven't gone there for many years. I should really reassess it at some point in time. But I think you all have done something on mangrove.
So we are doing mangroves restoration, mangroves restoration work in Switzerland. But as Dr. Roshan said, the problems are massive, especially vis-a-vis say climate change. A lot of impact that these deltaic regions are facing are also because of climate change, and they're directly getting impacted with this, mixing of waters, and also the lands getting, displaced by water itself. So in migration, out migration, a lot of complex issues are happening, which are sometimes can have local solutions, but sometimes they will need maybe transboundary solutions, or from migration across the border, also from the urban centers and this side.
Yes, thank you for asking about the Sundarbans. So that is really something that worries me a lot. I also know something about mangroves. And with the Sundarbans, we need to look into it in this way, and all the other mangrove ecosystems in the world as well, but especially the Sundarbans, because we have, in this moment of time, a process of sea level rise. That means the ocean water, which is salty, it pushes into the Sundarbans from the sea. And from the back, we have glacial dynamics with the glaciers melting, with the glacial lakes filling, some of them bursting, causing a change in the hydrological system of the entire riverine system all the way down to the delta. So you have in this moment probably more water coming down from the glaciers than normal, which pushes, which changes again the hydrology. And the mangroves are species specific, adapted to a certain height above chart datum, to a certain salinity tolerance. And then once the glacial system has reached a tipping point, there will be less water coming down from there. Then you have another change in hydrology. So it's really a very dangerous situation. You can see that already in Pakistan in the Indus Delta, where there is already no more water coming from the Indus into the delta, and the mangroves are disappearing, and that then being exacerbated by the human interference, harbor building, etc. So, in summary, with everything that we discussed, really the biosphere reserves are fantastic systems because they have management plans. They need to be reviewed every 10 years, and they should be reviewed because there are changes. Socio-economic changes, socio-ecological changes, climate changes, pollution changes, and so on. So, in summary, we really need to have a few more biosphere reserves, let's say 25% more than what we have. They should all be connected with wildlife corridors, because elephants, tigers, deers, and large mammals in particular, they will have a genetic impoverishment otherwise. They can't breed properly, they will inbreed eventually, because of the habitat fragmentation. Right? So I think I'm not here because I work for UNESCO to make advertisement for biosphere reserves. I joined UNESCO because I believe in that system. But Sundarbans and mangroves in particular are extremely vulnerable, and we need to do much more about establishing coastal biosphere reserves for the protection of seagrass beds, mangroves, salt marshes, and so on.
Thank you. So I'll only take 2 questions, and both should be from the youngsters. That is the condition. One boy and one girl. Can someone raise hands? Yes? Can we have the mic there? Please identify yourself, sir.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Shima, and I come from Guru Gobind Singh University. I'm a faculty member in environment management. I wanted to know from any of the panelists regarding the management of biosphere reserves. Dr. Benno has mentioned that India needs to increase the number of biosphere reserves. My question is not on for the increase of biosphere reserves, but I just wanted to throw that how effective is the management of biosphere reserves in India in this existing 18 biosphere reserves?
So Dr.
I have also heard
Question
from
is to
the
you.
comments
You're
from,
putting it in
no,
tight
from
spot.
any one of them. I just heard the comments from the president just now that we need to take consideration of the tribal communities also. I was involved in one of the projects in Dibang Biosphere Reserve in Arunachal Pradesh way back in 2005-06. There, I have the opportunity to interact with the communities there, living there. But the communities are not even aware of that they are part of the village, the agricultural fields that they are doing is part of the biosphere reserve. Even they are not aware. So in this case, I just wanted to know, is there any mechanism from the central government or the UNESCO to measure how much effective is
I
the
understand you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr. Benno.
Yeah, I mean, you asked many questions in your one question. And I don't think I have time to answer all of them. But let me just be very blunt and very straightforward, because I think time is ticking as well.
Yeah.
If the community is not being involved in the planning, in the management, and in the zonation of the biosphere reserve, it will not work. It will not work. And if they are not involved now, then the biosphere reserve managers, they should better make sure that they involve them pretty soon, because the tribal systems or the local system, not just tribal, also everybody who lives inside or around the biosphere reserves, they should love it. They should embrace it. They should feel that they have a pride of it. For example, myself in Germany, my house where I live, it's not in a biosphere reserve, but in a geopark, in the UNESCO Global Geopark. I'm very proud of that because it's an extremely beautiful geopark. And I'm sure that many people who live in the same city like myself, they feel the same. So community involvement must. Otherwise it will not work.
One girl, please. Please identify yourself and be brief in your question. Don't ask too many questions in one question.
No, I just have one question. My name is Savannah. I live from Miranda House. I'm a student of geography. And my question is for Ma'am Priya Gupta. You talked about that solutions and strategies around biosphere reserves need to be local. But then in one of your slides, there was talk about GIS and remote sensing, which inhales that technology is the future of policy and governance. So these are the two separate poles in a globe, like technology and local communities. How do you think that in the governance perspective of biosphere reserve, there would be a bridge between the ethnic and tribal communities and the growing technology?
Hi. So the technology that I talked about, and I also said traditional knowledge, that technology is to aid something. It is not the end in itself. It has to aid whatever we are meaning to, achieve. So if we do not have enough, say, knowledge about an area from, say, science point of view, and we want to make management plans. And in that sense, what science can do is come up with using these technologies, come up with this very localized information, high resolution information of these local areas, and then combine it with the traditional knowledge of these people. And that is from where we can go on to achieving a more, as I said, inclusive plan which integrates both. It doesn't prioritize or it doesn't displaces either of the knowledge. So both knowledge systems are important. That is why the localized solution doesn't mean we do not use the GIS or these information. GIS actually technology is heavily used, or GPS, even the GPS systems are heavily used in resource mapping by local communities in many areas nowadays. We do trainings for local communities and youths on using these GPS technologies and just going around in their areas, just marketing, mapping or sort of tagging those areas and creating a map of their area. Now that area map is actually a beautiful combination of their traditional knowledge because they know from where these resources have come from as well as the modern technology. So this is what I was actually talking about, using this excellent modern technology that we have and also integrating it with the traditional knowledge that we of course have in our country.
Dr. Beni?
Yeah, on a different subject, but related to everything that we're discussing tonight, I would like to make you aware that there is a World Congress on Biosphere Reserves every 10 years taking place. 20 years ago it was in Madrid in Spain. Not surprising that Spain is world champion on biosphere reserves by numbers. 10 years ago it was in Lima in Peru. There was 1,000 people there, which is a pretty high number for a country that is so difficult to be reached by aeroplane like Lima. I remember I had to fly from Addis Ababa to Jeddah to Frankfurt, Amsterdam to Lima. This year, on the 22nd to the 27th of September, it's taking place in neighboring China, in the city of Hangzhou. And I would like to encourage panelists, but also everybody else here, go there. That's the place where you can ask all these questions and you will get even better answers than ours. And of course, we would like to see a very strong Indian participation in the World Congress in Hangzhou in September this year.
Thank you, sir. So my job of a task, tough task of moderating this session is now coming to an end. May I request President Biosphere Foundation Praveen Garg to give his concluding remarks on the 2-hour long, very engaging and interesting session. Thank you, Mr. Garg.
To everyone, I will take only 1/5 of time allotted to me, just 3 minutes. Not more than that. I know there are so many things to be completed. So I won't repeat the statistics. We are all saturated now. We are enlightened with what biospheres are, how many are there, and what needs to be done. Only thing is, I would say that this event is our 5th consecutive gathering and has been another milestone in our commitment to raising awareness about environmental sustainability. But our commitment extends beyond discussions. Mobius Foundation remains steadfast in driving action through impactful initiatives in education and sustainability. Just to name the few, Gyan Kanya Shakti 100 School program, which we are running in Madhya Pradesh and UP, in collaboration with Lotus Petal Foundation. We are providing education to the girls by digital learning, for distance digital learning. And we are having very good results so far. It's a continuing program. Second is Project Akar, which is in partnership with Population Foundation of India and Janini. And we are working towards stabilizing the population in this country. And we are operating in the districts which are very high, which is empowering young minds in Northeast India, equipping them with knowledge and tools to champion sustainability, in a fragile ecosystems. We have our dedicated think tank which organized this program today, which is driven by research, advocacy, and policy recommendations. So we are reinforcing our mission to build a truly sustainable future. I hope today's discussions have sparked deeper awareness of the importance of biosphere reserves and the role each of us plays in the conservation. The responsibility to protect these vital ecosystems is not just for scientists or policymakers, it belongs to all of us. As a legendary conservationist, Jane Goodall said, what you do makes a difference. What you do makes a difference. What kind of difference you want to make? So let's take the inspiration forward and not just in words, but in actions to ensure a healthier planet for generations to come. Thank you to all of you for being part of this journey.
Thank you so much, sir, for concluding remarks. We encourage all the participants to explore the wonderful coffee table booklets of the previous panel discussions which sir is on our website. The discussion has been truly provoking. Thank you so much for the wonderful diverse perspectives which have been shared by our panelists and our moderator, sir. Finally, we need to move to the next segment where I will request our chairman, sir, Mr. Pradeep Vermaji, and our president, Mr. Praveen Garg, to join the stage for the launch of the report on climate liability, justice and jurisprudence. This report is actually featuring the insights from the legal experts and the environmentalists on advocating the climate change, liability, justice and jurisprudence. This report serves as a vital resource for exploring climate litigation and the impact of jurisprudence on building a sustainable future. This request to please open the ribbons and launch the booklet. Now we would like to request Chairman Sir and President Sir to stay on the stage for the presentation as well. The facilitations is mainly comprised of the booklets where we have addressed the key conservation issues and recommendations for the flagship species like tiger and dolphin and the important ecosystem called wetlands. And a plan as a token of appreciation for today's wonderful discussion. Please a round of applause. sheets of biosphere reserves. These fact sheets on biosphere reserves of India actually highlights the unique biodiversity, ecological importance of the biosphere reserve. This is a pioneer publication from Mobis Foundation, which is meticulously compiled document.
Sir, is it?
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for the participation. The main aim of this fact sheet is basically to create the awareness about the biosphere reserves.
ये इनका लास्ट हाँ ये वाला भेजा था पार्टिसिपेशन यार इन्होंने कम्युनिटी के लिए बोला था उन्होंने बोला था कि कुछ मतलब कोई ऐसी कंट्री है वहाँ पे उससे पैनल डिस्कशन होगा वहाँ पे उसमें यू कैन